Jenny Millers was 29 years old, a waitress at Rosie's Diner, a small establishment nestled between a hardware store and a laundromat in rural Kansas. Her life unfolded in predictable rhythm each day. Wake before dawn, walk 3 blocks to work, tie her faded blue apron around her waist, and greet the morning regulars with a smile that never betrayed the loneliness behind it. She lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment above the pharmacy. Her only family existed now in fading photographs, yellowed by time. Her father had died when she was 15. Her mother followed 2 years later. The aunt who raised her afterward had moved to Arizona, seeking relief from arthritis, leaving Jenny with little more than holiday phone calls and the occasional letter. On a quiet Tuesday in early October, Jenny first noticed a boy. He couldn't have been older than 10. Small for his age, with cautious eyes that seemed to absorb everything without revealing anything. He sat in the farthest booth from the door, a backpack too large for his frame propped beside him, and a book always open on the table. The first time, he ordered only a glass of water. Jenny brought it with a gentle smile and a paper straw. He nodded his thanks, so slightly it was almost imperceptible. The second day, the same. The third, the fourth. By the second week, Jenny had come to recognize his routine. He arrived at exactly 7:15 a.m., 45 minutes before school began at the elementary school just 3 blocks away. He sat quietly, reading, sipping water slowly, while watching other customers dig into stacks of pancakes, eggs, bacon, and toast. At 7:55, he would close his book, whisper thank you, and leave, never having eaten. On the 15th day, Jenny brought him a plate of pancakes by mistake. "Oh, sorry," she said, setting it down as if genuinely confused. "The kitchen made an extra. I'll just leave it here instead of tossing it." The boy looked up, suspicion and hunger warring in his eyes. "It's okay," Jenny reassured him softly. "Sometimes the cook gets the orders mixed up. Better to eat it than waste it, right?" She turned and walked away before he could respond. From behind the counter, she watched as he slowly reached for a fork. When she returned 10 minutes later, the plate was empty. His eyes, however, remained locked on his book, a deliberate avoidance that tugged at her heart. "Thank you," he whispered when she cleared the plate. And so began their silent ritual. Each morning, Jenny would bring him the extra plate. Pancakes one day, scrambled eggs and toast the next, oatmeal with brown sugar when the mornings turned colder. The boy never asked for anything, never initiated conversation beyond a quiet thank you, but he always ate. Sometimes so fast it seemed he feared it might vanish. "Who's that kid you keep feeding?" asked Harold, a retired postal worker who sat at the same stool every morning. "Don't know," Jenny replied, "but he's hungry." Later that week, Kathy from the grill cornered Jenny in the back. "You're feeding a stray," she said, not unkindly, but with the practical tone of someone who'd seen kindness turn complicated. "You give handouts. They don't learn gratitude. He'll vanish one day. They always do." Jenny didn't argue. She merely shrugged and replied, "It's fine. I used to be that hungry too." It was the most personal thing she'd ever shared with her co-workers in the 3 years she'd worked at Rosie's. The boy never told her his name, and she never asked. Something in his quiet, careful presence told her all she needed to know. He always entered and exited the diner the same way, carefully angling himself to keep both the door and the window in view. That subtle vigilance told Jenny one thing clearly. Asking questions would only drive him away. So she never did. Instead, she made sure his water glass was always full, his pancakes were warm, and the diner felt like a place where, for 40 minutes each morning, he could breathe just a little easier. Sometimes, when the diner was quiet and the boy was lost in his book, Jenny allowed herself to wonder. Did he live nearby? Did he have family? Why was he always alone? And why did hunger seem like such a familiar companion to him? But she pushed those questions aside. In her experience, kindness with conditions wasn't kindness at all. She simply continued their silent arrangement, watching as his shoulders gradually loosened from their always tense hunch, as his eyes began to meet hers a second longer each time she approached his table. That tiny shift, that fleeting eye contact that grew from a millisecond to maybe 2, was enough to convince Jenny that whatever she was doing, however small, was making a difference. By the 6th week, others in the diner had started to notice. Most said nothing, but a few couldn't resist passing judgment, their observations tinged with particular cruelty of those who had long forgotten what it meant to need help. "Playing charity worker on company time?" asked a businessman one morning, his tone lined with disdain. "Kids these days expect handouts everywhere. Times must be changing," muttered another regular. "Back in my day, no one gave away food just because someone looked sad." Jenny heard these comments, but let them slide off her like rain on a window pane. She had learned early that defending kindness often only hardened the hearts of those inclined to criticize it. But Mark, the diner's manager, wasn't so easily ignored. One morning, he called Jenny into the cramped office behind the kitchen. His face was stern beneath a sheen of sweat. "I've been watching you with that kid," he said, fingers drumming against a laminate desk. "Can't have employees giving away free meals. It's bad for business. Sets a precedent." Jenny twisted the edge of her apron. "I understand. I'll pay for it myself." Mark's eyebrows rose. "From your tips? Those barely cover your rent." "It's my choice," Jenny replied, her voice steady with quiet resolve. "Just one meal a day. I can manage." Mark studied her for a moment, then sighed. "Fine, but if it affects your work, or if that kid causes any trouble, it stops. Understood?" Jenny nodded, relief washing over her. She had expected to be reprimanded, maybe even fired. This compromise, though, it was one she could live with. From that day forward, she quietly set aside part of her tips, money that could have gone toward a new winter coat or the dental appointment she kept postponing, and used it to cover the boys' breakfast. Then, on a particularly cold Thursday in November, the boy didn't come. Jenny caught herself glancing at the door every few minutes, unease tightening in her chest. Still, she prepared his usual plate of pancakes and placed it at his booth, just in case. "Waste of food," Kathy muttered, shaking her head as she passed by. By closing time, the untouched plate sat like a quiet accusation. Jenny wrapped the cold pancakes and took them home, unable to toss them out. The boy didn't return the next day, or the day after that. A week passed, still no sign of him. Jenny began to wonder if Kathy had been right. Had he simply moved on, as strays so often did? The thought settled into her like a hollow ache she couldn't explain. She hadn't known his name, not his story, and yet his absence felt profound, a small light suddenly gone out. "Told you," Kathy said on the 10th day. Not cruelly, but with the certainty of someone whose pessimism had once again been proven correct. They never stick around once the free ride ends. During this time, Jenny noticed a customer taking photos of the empty booth, where she still occasionally left a meal just in case. The next day, she discovered why. A local Facebook group had shared the images with a mocking caption, "Rosie's Diner now serving imaginary charity cases." The comments were even crueler. "Publicity stunt. Bet they'll say the food goes to underprivileged children while tossing it in the trash. Feeding strays just creates dependency. That waitress needs a reality check." Next time a strange kid approaches you, remember this. You're being set up for something. Jenny had never considered herself particularly sensitive to public opinion, but the sheer meanness in those words struck a chord. That night, alone in her apartment, she questioned her actions for the first time. Was she being naive, offering help to someone she knew nothing about? Was she simply projecting her own past onto a situation she didn't fully understand? Seeking comfort, she opened a small wooden box that held her most treasured belongings. Inside lay a faded photograph of her father in his army medic uniform, smiling gently despite the stark desert backdrop. Next to it sat a small leather journal he had carried throughout his service, its pages soft and worn from years of handling. Jenny opened to a dog-eared page and read the words she had memorized long ago. "Share a half ration with a local boy today. Johnson said I was crazy, said he might report our position to hostiles. Maybe, but the look in his eyes when he ate, it was the same as mine when Mom saved me the last piece of bread during hard times. No one grows poor by sharing half a loaf, but those who forget to share, they stay hungry their whole lives." She ran her fingers over her father's handwriting. In that moment, A quiet clarity settled over her. She didn't need to know the boy's name, his story, or his intentions. Hunger, whether the body or the soul, didn't ask for explanations. It asked for bread. And kindness wasn't about having all the answers. Nobody knew the boy's name. Nobody remembered the face of the one who helped. But each morning, someone wasn't hungry. And sometimes that was enough. If you still believe small acts can change a life, type hope. On the morning of the boy's 23rd absence, Jenny arrived at the diner with lowered expectations. The habit of glancing at the door at 7:15 still lingered, but the sharp anticipation had dulled to quiet resignation. Still, she prepared a modest plate of pancakes and set it at his usual booth, just in case. At 9:17 a.m., everything changed. The first sign was a sudden hush that settled over the usually lively diner. Jenny, refilling coffee at a booth near the window, looked up to see 4 black SUVs with government plates pulling into the tiny parking lot. They moved in synchronized precision, forming a half circle in front of the entrance. Conversations halted. Forks paused midair. Even passers-by on the sidewalk slowed, watching as uniformed men stepped out and stood rigidly beside each vehicle. From the lead SUV, a man emerged, tall, composed, his posture exuding authority even before the medals on his chest caught the light. He wore the dress uniform of a high-ranking military officer, his weathered face speaking of sun, sacrifice, and long service. He scanned the diner's facade, then strode toward the entrance with 2 younger officers flanking him. The bell above the door chimed, startling in the sudden quiet. Mark stepped out from the office, adjusting his tie nervously. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice noticeably higher than usual. The officer removed his cap. "I'm looking for someone who works here. A woman named Jenny." The diner was so quiet that Jenny could hear the refrigerator humming behind the counter. All eyes turned toward her as she stepped forward, still holding the coffee pot. "I'm Jenny," she said. "I'm Jenny," she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the sudden dryness in her throat. The officer's stern expression softened slightly. "Jenny Millers?" She nodded, setting down the coffee pot before her trembling hands could betray her anxiety. "My name is Colonel David Reeves, United States Army Special Forces Command," he said, reaching into his breast pocket. He withdrew a crisp, official-looking envelope. "I'm here because of a promise made to one of my men." He extended the envelope toward her. "This is a letter from the Commanding General of Special Forces Operations, and I also have a personal message from Adam's father." "Adam?" Jenny repeated, the name unfamiliar, yet it carried a strange weight. "The boy you've been feeding these past several months." Colonel Reeves explained gently. "Adam Thompson. His father was Master Sergeant James Thompson, one of the finest soldiers I ever had the honor commanding. Was." The single word landed with the weight of a blow. Jenny's breath caught. "I don't understand," she said, her hand still not reaching for the envelope. "Is Adam okay?" "He's safe," the colonel assured her. "He's with his grandparents now, in Colorado. But for almost 3 months, he came here every morning before school. That was after his father deployed on a classified operation." The pieces began to fall into place in Jenny's mind. His silence, his watchfulness, the hunger that seemed to reach deeper than his stomach. What Sergeant Thompson didn't know, the colonel continued, was that his wife left shortly after he deployed. She abandoned Adam. The murmur of shock rippled through the diner. The boy was too proud, too scared of being taken away to tell anyone. He survived alone, using a small emergency fund his father left him. He stretched what little he had beyond what most could imagine. Jenny's heart constricted. Adam, now with a name, with a story, had been trying to survive, day by day, waiting for a father who would never return. Sergeant Thompson fell in Afghanistan 2 months ago. Colonel Reeves said quietly, his voice controlled but heavy. In his final letter, he wrote that if anything happened to him, we were to find a woman named Jenny at the diner, the one who fed Adam without ever asking questions. He opened the envelope and carefully removed a worn, handwritten note. He wrote, "If I don't make it back, please find a person who gave my son breakfast." Adam mentioned her often, said she never asked why he was alone, never made him feel ashamed. She just fed him, day after day, expecting nothing. Tell her she didn't just feed a hungry child. She preserved the dignity of a soldier's son. Jenny took the letter with trembling hands, her vision blurred with tears. The colonel continued, his voice a distant echo through the emotion tightening her chest. This letter was read at Sergeant Thompson's memorial service. When Adam finally told us about you, the entire Special Forces community made it our mission to find you, to thank you, in person. He paused, struggling for composure. What you did for the child of one of our own, without even knowing who he was, it means something to all of us. The diner had fallen completely silent. Even those who had once mocked her actions sat motionless, some in shock, others quietly ashamed. Colonel Reeves straightened to full height, then snapped to attention. In one fluid motion, he rendered a formal military salute, a gesture rarely given to civilians. Behind him, every military personnel present did the same. On behalf of the United States Army Special Forces, the brothers in arms of Master Sergeant James Thompson, and, most importantly, on behalf of Adam, the colonel said firmly, "Thank you." Jenny stood frozen in place, overwhelmed by the realization that her simple acts, warm pancakes, scrambled eggs, a glass of milk, and a silent smile, had meant everything to a boy enduring the unthinkable. His father was fighting his last battles far from home. "I didn't know," Jenny finally managed, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I just couldn't let him go hungry." The colonel nodded, his expression soft. "Sometimes that's enough, Miss Millers. Sometimes feeding a hungry child without asking why they're hungry is the greatest kindness of all." As if on cue, every military person in the room and every soldier stationed outside by the vehicles saluted in perfect unison. The customers in the diner, moved by the quiet power of the ceremony unfolding before them, rose to their feet in a hush of shared respect. Jenny, the quiet waitress who had lived nearly invisibly for years, now stood in the center of it all, clutching a father's final thank you in her hands. A woman whose small, daily acts of kindness had preserved not only a child's well-being, but a soldier's honor and peace of mind in his final days. The week following Colonel Reeves' visit transformed Rosie's diner in ways no one could have anticipated. The story spread quickly through conversations, social media posts, and then into the pages of the local newspaper. The same Facebook group that had once mocked Jenny for her so-called imaginary charity case now share a heartfelt retelling of Master Sergeant Thompson's letter, gathering thousands of shares and comments filled with support. Regular customers began specifically requesting to sit in Jenny's section. Many left generous tips, along with handwritten notes. "Thank you for reminding us what matters most. And my son is in the Navy. Your kindness gives me hope." Mark Your Way, who had initially resented Jenny's free pancakes, hung a small American flag beside the booth where Adam had once sat. Beneath it, he placed a discreet plaque, reserved for those who serve and the families who wait. That booth never sat empty again. It was frequented by veterans, active duty personnel passing through town, and occasionally by families who clearly carried burdens of their own, quietly welcomed and served with dignity. 7 days after the colonel's visit, a manila envelope arrived at the diner, addressed simply to Jenny. Inside was a handwritten letter, neatly penned on lined notebook paper. The carefully formed letters revealed the youth of its author. "Dear Miss Jenny, I didn't know your name until the day the colonel came to find you. But every morning, during those months, you were the only person who looked at me like I was invisible or broken. Dad always said real heroes don't wear capes. They wear the uniform. But I think sometimes they wear aprons too." When Dad stopped writing, I thought the world had forgotten both of us. But you remembered me every day, even when I couldn't tell you why I was alone. Grandma and Grandpa are nice. They're teaching me to fish, and Grandma makes good cookies. But I miss Dad, and sometimes I miss your pancakes too. Thank you for not asking questions when I couldn't answer them. Your friend, Adam Thompson, P.S. I finished the book I was reading. It had a happy ending after all. Jenny framed the letter and hung it behind the counter. Not prominently, not for display, but as a quiet reminder to herself of why small acts of compassion matter. When customers asked about it, she'd simply smile and say, "Just a thank you note from a special customer." Word of the diner's connection to the special forces spread across military communities. Soldiers passing through town made purposeful detours to visit, often leaving unit coins or patches as tokens of appreciation. These found their place on a small bulletin board behind the counter, a growing collage of gratitude from around the world. 3 months after the colonel's visit, a school group came to the diner after a field trip. As Jenny refilled water glasses, an 8-year-old girl with curious eyes looked up and said, "My dad says you're a hero. Do you feel like one?" Jenny smiled, kneeling to meet the child's gaze. "No, sweetheart," she said gently. "I'm just someone who knows what it feels like to be hungry. Not just for food," the girl's teacher added softly, having overheard the exchange. Jenny looked up, meeting the woman's understanding gaze with a quiet nod. The teacher was right. Hunger came in many forms. Food was only the most visible. As summer approached, the diner hosted a fundraiser for military families, raising enough to establish a small emergency fund for children of deployed parents. Mark, to everyone's surprise, personally matched the donations. Later, he admitted to Jenny that her quiet persistence had changed something in him. "Never understood why my father was so insistent on feeding every stray kid in the neighborhood," he confessed. "Drove my mother crazy. But I think I get it now. Sometimes a meal is more than just food." One quiet Tuesday morning, nearly a year after Adam had first entered the diner, Jenny arrived for her shift and found something small and metallic on her station. A challenge coin, an honor carried in exchange by military personnel, lay beside her order pad. One side bore the insignia of the U.S. Special Forces. The other had been custom engraved, "Semper Memor," always remembering. Jenny looked around the empty diner, scanning for whoever had left it. Seeing no one, she stepped outside, searching the street as the early morning breeze stirred the American flag above the door. No unfamiliar cars, no waiting messengers, just the town waking up, sprinklers ticking across lawns, and the distant hum of the school bus making its rounds. She slipped the coin into her pocket, its weight grounding her. It reminded her that kindness, offered freely and without expectation, sometimes returns in quiet, meaningful ways. That evening, as she hung her apron before heading home, Jenny noticed Mark placing a new sign in the window. Simple, understated, but powerful. It read, "Whoever you are, whatever you can pay, no one leaves hungry." When he saw her watching, he shrugged, a little self-conscious. New policy. Figured it was time. Jenny smiled, understanding the unspoken truth behind his gesture. No speeches, no declarations, just a silent commitment to see the need in others and meet it. Food without judgment, kindness without questions. As she walked home in the golden fading light, the challenge coin pressed gently against her leg. Jenny thought about Adam, now growing up in Colorado, surrounded by love, carrying his father's legacy. She hoped he also carried the knowledge that, even in the loneliest moments, kindness still finds a way to appear. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some people only need to know that today, someone isn't hungry, and sometimes that is enough to change a life. You might forget this story in a few days, but if no one tells again, history stays silent. Subscribe to Sacrifice and Survival, where justice, kindness, and memory are honored until the end. The young waitress had once gently slid a plate of pancakes across the table to a boy who never said his name. She never expected thanks, never asked questions. But that morning, as four gleaming black SUVs pulled up in front of the diner, the entire town paused. A man in full military dress stepped out, carrying a carefully folded letter. Who were they? Why had they come? Because sometimes someone who seems invisible changes everything.